to have your property surveyed, when your property would be surveyed, what they would do is they would take to find a point in the middle of your property. They might take a measurement from two different positions and to form a triangle, and that way you can basically know where you're at on the landscape. And in the case of the owl, of course, they're in a 3D environment. It's not like a two-dimension. Those owls are able to listen and to hear in almost every single direction, and those ears are positioned in such a way so that they can basically track where their prey is or whatever else is out there. And then they have these, as we mentioned, the ear tufts, and they're found on the tops of the heads. And as I said, some owls have it. For example, barred owls don't have it, but your great horns and your screech owls and your long ears and your short ears, they typically are going to have these tufts. Some people suggest it's like camouflage, make them look fierce to predators, also maybe for communication. But one thing we do know, if you startle an owl or if suddenly you were to stumble upon one, those ear tufts would go up. That means that they're paying attention. And again, we talked about the facial disc, and this is this radar dish, and it's especially profound in this species here, which is a barn owl. And you can see if sound is coming, it's almost like it's going to capture into the face and filter it to the ears. So the owls use their facial disc to adjust their hearing, and they can basically track the sound one ear in the from the other, and just by moving its feathers around its face, they can kind of gauge where things are coming from. And again, that becomes significant because most of the owls are hunting at night. That's when they capture their prey. They also have these large eyes, and the eyes are fixed in place in the center of the head. And what it does is allows for greater depth perception than other birds. And because their eyes are fixed, owls have the ability to turn their head 280 degrees. And in order to do that, they have a couple of adaptations. One is they have 14 vertebrae in their necks, which is twice as many as humans. And there's only one bone situated at the top of an owl's backbone, whereas humans have two. And the owl can pivot, it can pivot on its vertebral column, much the way in which your body can pivot on a foot. And owls also have a special arrangement in their jugular vein because they're actually able to turn their head around in that position. They have the capacity to be able to still have blood flowing to their head even when they turn at such an extreme measure, so that they can still rotate and that basically the blood flow is not going to be cut off. More about the owls. And, because owls are most active at night, their eyes must be very efficient for collecting light. So we have rods and cones. The rods is, black and white vision, and the cones are what you use to see color. Well, in the case of owls, because they're hunting at night, they have a lot of rods to be able to pick up things, but they don't have many cones. And the reason for that is you really don't need color in the nighttime, and you don't have to see color. Color is primarily based on sunlight. So if there's no sunlight, you're going to bank up on those rods so that you can be able to see. You can be able to see in that black and white image. And to protect their eyes, they have three eyelids. They have an upper, they have a lower, but they also have a nictitating membrane. Nictitating membrane, and much I think sharks have it too. Basically, when they go and something would come and touch their face, the nictitating membrane automatically closes to protect the eye. And I think that that's especially necessary because if you're an owl and you're going through a tangle of brush, you don't want anything to clip your eye. You don't want anything sticking in your eye. So this membrane is there to protect the owl so that it can be able to continue to hunt. And if an owl does lose its eyes, sometimes it's a problem when it comes to releasing them back in the wild, because their eyes are important. Even though they can hunt in total darkness and still successfully capture prey, the eyes are still very, very important. Okay, now, and getting back into more detail of the eyes. If you take a look, this is a diagram of a human eye. Take a look at the shape of an owl's eye. It's a little bit different. And part of the reason it's different is you notice that you have this back edge here, and almost like the way the face of an owl is designed, the eyes have that same basic structure, in that all of the light that comes through the lens has this greater surface area in the back to be able to pick up and therefore see, as compared to our eyes, which is basically almost completely round. Now, they have, again, very large, ultra sensitive eyes, and and they also have, they can view things about 110 degrees, with about a 70 degrees being binocular vision, as compared to human beings. We have a field of view that covers 180 degrees, with a 140 degrees being binocular. So one of the things you'll notice with owls, because those eyes are fixed, and if they're looking at you, sometimes in order to get a better depth perception, they're looking at you, they're actually going to kind of roll their head. They're going to tilt so that they can get a better view at you. They can't move their eyes. Like you and I can move our eyes from side to side. Owls can't do that. And that's because their eyes are so big. The next thing about owls that's really, really important is their feathers. And if you ever look at the magnification of the trailing edge of a feather on an owl, you'll notice that it's frayed. The edges are frayed. They're not straight down to the edge. And they're there frayed because what that does is it allows the air to pass through those edges, and therefore they're able to fly quietly. And that is significant, because if you're hunting cute little mice that are running around on the ground, you don't want to give them any warning. So having silent feathering enables the owls to be able to creep up on their prey. They can hear it, they can see it at dark, and they can also sneak up on it without having to scare them. There is an exception to this rule. There's the Blankenston's owl, which is from Russia, which actually feeds on salmon, and it actually pulls them from the river. And they don't necessarily need to have this adaptation, because they're not really sneaking up on mammals or other animals. They're actually grabbing fish off the surface, and there's no sense in warning them, warning their prey, because, so they don't need to have this particular adaptation. But most other owls do have this adaptation. Next is the talons. Many of them have feathers all the way down to the feet. If you ever look at most hawks, except for rough-legged hawks, most hawks don't have feathering all the way down to the feet. And it may serve as a protection against the prey. But you also notice that the owls, they have 4 toes, and they will have 2 forward and 2 back. And then when they perch, they can actually rotate the one forward, and they can have 3 to the front and 1 to the back if they're perching. And the talons are the tools by which the owl takes its prey. And in short, what they're going to do is they're going to grab the prey with the talons. They're not really using the beak as much as they're using those talons, are the primary method by which they kill. And as I mentioned, those talons are about half the size of my hand. You can imagine how deep on a small mammal the talons go into the prey. And of course, these talons are actually very, very strong in proportion to even our hands. When an owl clenches its talons, the force of 28 pounds to open. So there's a lot of pressure in there. When it grabs its prey, 2 go forward, 2 go back. And you can imagine, if you're the prey item, there's no exit. There's no exit. You're completely surrounded by talons. Okay, next we're going to talk about some hunting behavior. As I said, all of our owls are carnivores. They're eating insects, they're eating mammals. They have their large eyes, they have their asymmetrical ears, they have their silent wings, and they have their talons. And some of the species have different strategies when it comes to hunting. For example, if you are a barn owl goes out at night and is floating around the fields listening for their prey. So they're actually actively out there searching for their prey. In the case of an owl such as a great horned owl, What they are actually going to do is they're actually going to perch, and they're going to wait for their prey to show up. And then they're going to drop down and they're going to grab their prey. So there's these different strategies based on the species of the owl. And different species have different strategies. Screech owls are primarily going to be perch feeders. The short ears in the barns are definitely looking to search for their prey out in the wide open fields. And they also, and we'll talk about that, they hunt in different habitats. When they are hunting, when an owl swoops, it goes for its prey head first, and then the talons at the last minute swing down and they grab the item. And frequently you'll see that they'll actually do that mantling behavior, which this is which being shown here. The mantling behavior, birds of prey are notorious for doing that. Hawks do that also. And it's basically to conceal the prey item from other creatures so they can't see what's going on. It's almost like a protection of the food they've just been able to catch. I love this image here. This is basically the hunting strategy of a barn owl. And I love this because if you take a look at the owl, it's flying in a horizontal position across the field. And then all of a sudden its ears will pick up the item, the food item, which is the mouse. And you'll notice that the head really doesn't turn. The whole body kind of rotates and the head stays locked on the sound of the prey. And you'll notice that it goes through this whole position. The head is completely locked on where the prey item is. And then at the last minute, the head comes up, the talons go down, and it grabs its prey. And it's just a pretty amazing and of course they're hunting at night frequently, so we don't get a chance to see that, but it's just pretty amazing to watch. Especially I have seen both barn owl and short-eared owls and they hunt, and it's just amazing to watch them when they're floating out across the field. And then the next thing, what do owls eat? Well, they eat mostly insects, voles, moles, rodents, birds. In the case of some of our larger owls, the great horned owl, because they don't have a great sense of smell, they will take even an animal such as a skunk. And because owls take that whole food item, that whole prey item, and they swallow it whole, what happens is that food goes down into the gizzards, and then the soft tissue gets separated out from the hard tissue. And then all of a sudden, after a certain time period of digestion, the owl will actually regurgitate the pellet. And the pellet consists of the bones, it consists of the fur or the feathers. And then here's a great example of a snowy owl, which is just coughed up, almost like a cat coughs up a hairball. The owl coughs up its pellet. Now, one of the things I find fascinating about the pellets is that if you are a mammologist, if you're studying mammals, you love to find these pellets, because this is a way in which you can basically do a survey of the mammals within a given area. And there was a professor out at Penn State University. I think it was Penn State University. I forget what school it was, but I read an article in which basically he was studying least weasels, which are the smallest weasels in the world. And one of the things he would do is he would look for the owl pellets. And because they have these wonderful capsules, and what they'll do, what some of the mammalogists will do, is they'll actually take apart the pellet, and you can separate out all the bones, all the hair, and then you can identify, is it a shrew, is it a vole, is it a mouse, based on the dentures of the prey item. And you can see right in here, here's the skull. Right here is the skull of whatever this eating. There could be a number of different animals contained within a single pellet. And actually, this is something, if you're ever out and you see a bunch of whitewash underneath a tree, you might want to search around to see if you can find any pellets, because they're always the gold mine. In terms of an owl's nesting cycle, first of all, owls will use abandoned nests. Some of them use tree cavities, cliff edges, or even man-made structures. And they kind of have an interesting nesting cycle in that, depending on the amount of food that's available, the owls will lay as many eggs as that amount of food can support. So if it's a really bad year for meadow voles, they may lay no eggs whatsoever. But if it's a really good year, they may lay up, in this case, up to 13 eggs. And the thing that's kind of weird about owls is, unlike our passerines, like our robins and cardinals and things like that, when they nest, their cardinals, your robins, they're going to lay an egg a day until they have a full clutch. Once they have a full clutch, then they'll incubate. And the reason that those passerines are doing that is they want all their youngsters to be at the same age. Owls don't do that. Soon as an egg is laid, they're going to start incubating. So if you have 13 eggs, this is just a hypothetical, that very first egg is going to hatch out sooner as compared to that 13th egg. And typically what happens when it comes to owls is, if they overshoot, the older owls are typically going to eat the younger one. So they're going to maximize the number of young based on the amount of prey that they can take. Let's see. The male and the female, they alternate incubation of the eggs. And then the eggs take about 30 days to hatch, depending on the species. In this particular case, this is an example on the left. This is the barn owl in the box. And this picture here, there are two little owlets sitting inside of the nest at the John James Audubon Center at Mill Grove. Cute little puffballs, they really are. Yeah, the first outlet is born and has a higher success simply because it's getting more of the food, and it's also further advanced than the rest of them. Depending on the species, it can take anywhere from 9 to 10 weeks after hatching for fledging. In the case of a barn owl, that's going to be 7 to 8 weeks, and 4 to 5 weeks for screech owls. And the fledglings are usually cared for by the parents for a short time after they leave their nest. And it's kind of cute when they, after a certain time period, these little puffballs, and here's a good example of these little saw-whet owls, and they'll actually get out of the nest, and they'll be called branchers. They're actually going to be perched on the branchers, and they kind of expand their range as they're creeping out, and they'll continue to be fed by the youngsters. That's always a fun stage if you can find some brancher of screech owls or even great horned owls from a nest. And then most of the owls, they'll reach sexual immaturity in about 1 year, so they'll be ready to breed the next year. Some of the larger owls might take a longer period of time. Just as a comparison, we have some size ranges. In our area, northern saw-whet owl, to give you an idea, this is on centimeters, 20 centimeters. This is about 8 inches in size. Comparison, an American robin is 9 inches, including the tail. So this is a tiny, tiny little owl. Tiny, tiny little owl. Screech owl is a little bit bigger than that, somewhere around 10 to 12 inches. We have our great horned owl. As I said, it's about 24 inches. And then you can have something such as a great gray owl, which it could be anywhere about 34 inches in size. We don't typically see great gray owls. They're more of a Arctic tundra, boreal forest bird that doesn't come down to this region that frequently. So let's just give you a comparison. And these are all just different size ranges of owls. All of them in different parts of the world have unique ecologies and unique hunting strategies. So, okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, we're going to talk about some of our local owls, and we put this in the order of those that you're going to find most frequently. We're going to talk about the great horned owl, the eastern screech owl, the barred owl, the barn owl. It's pretty rare right now. That's part of the reason why we're moving ahead with this barn owl, helping the Game Commission with a barn owl project. Long-eared owls, short-eared owls, northern saw-whet owl, and occasionally a snowy owl. Okay, let's talk first about the great horned owl. Incredibly widespread and common, and they're adaptable to a wide range of different habitats. Wooded areas, they can hunt in fields. One of the things that's unique is that great horned owls have one of the largest ranges of any bird in the Americas. And what I mean by that, it's all of North America, some of Central America, but also there's places in South America where great horned owls live. So this is one of the biggest ranges of any of our owl species. It tends not to be located in the Amazon basin. It's more the highlands sections. Um, Again, we said the height 18 to 26 inches, wingspan, you're looking at about, was that 5 feet? Generally, they're non-migratory. The exception is some of these owls that might nest up here in the tundra, they might pull back a little bit in the really cold weather. Mottled gray, reddish brown face. There's differences in the markings. Females, and I wanted to make a mention, this is true for hawks also. And in most instances, the females are larger than the males. And in the case of great horned owls, you can actually tell the difference between male and female based on the call. The female, because she's larger, she has a deeper voice than the male. Mm. And one of the things I think that, and I don't know, I don't have information about this, but I suspect that the reason that the females are larger is in being larger, they can incubate the eggs better, as well as they can take larger prey. And here's an example that they'll take wide range of food sources. They'll take anything as large as a goose and as small as a cricket. They are primarily nocturnal though, and they often hunt at dawn and dusk. And they can be found actively hunting in the daylight, especially in midwinter and cloudy days. And they will still take over other nests of other species. And a prime example of that is I was monitoring a heron rookery, great blue heron rookery. And I had been monitoring it for years. And I went out one year to check out my great blue heron rookery. And lo and behold, sitting at the top of the highest nest was a great horned owl. And of course, it had two little babies. As I mentioned, they're actually sitting on eggs and maybe even have youngsters by February and March. So basically, they get started very early. And as a matter of fact, January 1 is typically the time period in which their breeding cycle starts. Another interesting story about great horned owls. I remember there's one time when I was talking about how the crows don't particularly like great horned owls. And there's one day when I was up at the Green Lane Reservoir Park, there was two crows come flying over the reservoir towards me, and they find a great horned owl. And of course, they're screaming bloody murder. And they're harassing the heck out of this great horned owl. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, a red-tailed hawk who heard the crows decided he's going to go investigate this great horned owl, and he starts harassing the great horned owl. And one of the crows decides it's going to take a stoop on the great horned owl. He ducks down, he brushes over the head of the great horned owl, and the great horn goes right after him. And at the very last minute, the owl pulls up to grab the crow and just missed picking it off in midair. It was pretty wild to see. Another funny story regarding great horned owls. I remember my wife and I, we decided to do trick-or-treating outside for the kids, and all the kids are laughing and screaming and having a good time as they're walking down the street. And sure enough, there's a great horned owl who's calling back. And then a year later, my neighbor, who has a big mastiff-like dog, and she used to put him out, and sure enough, he would bark with the great horned owl. And these are the classic, the great horned owl. Hopefully everybody can hear that. These are two owls duetting back and forth. The deeper one is probably the female. Yep. Okay. Yeah, great. As I mentioned, crows, ravens, songbirds, they really hate great horned owl. And again, the reason is they'll get picked off their roost by these fellows. So they want to keep an eye on where they are. In this particular case, you can see this is I think it's a Western kingbird, which is riding the back of a great horned owl. I've actually seen Eastern kingbirds do this not only with great horns, but also with red-tailed hawks, where it looks like they're riding bronco on their back. It's pretty wild. If you ever get a chance, check that out. Especially kingbirds, they get called kingbirds because they don't take anything from anybody. Let's see. Next, we're going to talk about our next most common, which is the eastern screech owl. Cute little bugger. Mixed habitat, mixed woodlands, deciduous forest, parkland, wooded suburban areas. Smaller than the great horn. We're talking 6 to 10 inches in terms of the height, with a wingspan of about 18 to 22. You'll notice with all of our owls, they kind of have short tails, but fairly long wings. They are non-migratory, just like our great horned owl. A little short and stocky, almost no neck. There's little pointy ear tufts. They come in both a red and a gray phase. And it seems like I was just reading an article where I think it's in Ontario, somewhere in Ontario, they did a study. There's a higher proportion of gray phases as you go further north, and the red phase becomes more common as you go south. And one of the suspicions based on the study was winter survival is a little bit better for the gray phase or the gray morphs as compared to the reds. So that might kind of explain why there tends to be a little bit more of the gray phase. By the way, these two do cross. They can breed with each other. They're the same species. They just come in two different morphs. They eat most small animals, including birds, mammals, as well as earthworms, insects, crayfish, just about anything that's small they'll eat. And they nest in tree cavities, and you will mostly hear them as compared to see them. And this is the, oops. See if I can. That's the whinny call, tremolo. Now, one of the things I probably should have mentioned when it comes to trying to identify owls, highly suggest you go out and just be quiet and listen for them first before you would call back. And you don't want to call back to owls, especially in the breeding season. And if you do call back, don't do it really a lot. Tell you a little story about that. My wife and I, we were out on a Christmas bird count, and I played the tape, and I got a response from a screech owl. Great, we can tick it off the list. Good to go. Go to the next spot. I was thinking, and I was talking to her. I said, basically, you want me to play it one more time? She said, yeah, play it one more time. And sure enough, I played it one more time, and the owl was very angry at me and flew directly over my head, to the point where I basically caught it at the last second and ended up snapping my neck back. So you definitely don't want to overcall at all when it comes to trying to identify owls. My suggestion is just go out and get really quiet and see if they'll show up. Okay. Oh, sorry, my bad. You get to hear that one again. Okay, and this is just the screech owl leaving their nest cavity or leaving the perch position. I did have one nest in, not nest, I should say. It was inside of one of my my screech owl boxes at one point for about I'm going to say 2 months. And it's amazing because as the sun would set, he or she would creep up to the edge of the hole. And then he would have sleepy eyes, almost like a young toddler who's trying to wake up in the morning. And then as it got darker and darker, the eyes would get bigger, and then they would just shoot right out of the box, shoot right out. Next, we're going to talk about is the barred owl. And barred owls are known for being in mature forests or coastal rainforests. And Unfortunately, they have expanded their range in the Pacific Northwest, and now they're actually competing with their cousin, the spotted owls. And unfortunately, they do hybridize, and they do have a tendency to kind of wean out the spotted owls from within the territory. They're going to be bigger than the screech owl, and they are non-migratory and again primarily nocturnal. They have this beautiful pattern on the breast of streaks, the check pattern on the back. There's really round, no ear tufts, distinctive facial disc here. And these are perch hunters, and their diet is squirrels, chipmunks, mice, voles, rabbits, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and invertebrates. And they nest in either a natural cavity about 20 to 40 feet up. I have actually seen one in the snap of a tree. So when a tree snaps and there's a cavity laying below, I've actually seen them nest in that. And they will nest in man-made structures too. And the barred owl's call is, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" If you hear one of those, let me know, because these are not real common around here. Tends to be deeper, darker woods. That said, there was a professor who did a talk for us, and in Charlotte, North Carolina, these buggers love suburban Charlotte, North Carolina. They do very well. And for some reason in our area, it's always going to be in the mature forests. Oh, my bad. Okay. Okay, and that's what the barred owl looks like in flight. Next, we're going to talk about the barn owl. Again, this is the owl that we're actually targeting with the Game Commission. We're actually hoping to help them out by actually building some of these barn owl boxes. These are birds of open country. So these are farm fields, hay fields. They probably need at least 100 plus acres of open space. Height is about 12 inches, wingspan about 33. They are non-migratory and very nocturnal. Pale overall with dark eyes. This classic radar disc, as we mentioned. They have long legs and a short tail. And the females, again, somewhat larger and showier than the males. And they'll nest in natural cavities, deserted buildings, cliff edges, and nest boxes. This is definitely an owl. If you're a farmer, you want this critter on your property. And the reason is that 90% of their diet is rodents. And because of that, I actually want to see about having one of these boxes put up to a local CSA I belong to, because they have a major problem with meadow voles, and these buggers love meadow voles. And if you have a big outbreak of meadow voles, they're going to have more young, and therefore you can suck down more of these meadow voles. And that way, you can actually have. I know at our farm they have problems with sweet potatoes. Meadow voles destroy the sweet potatoes. We want to get some of these nearby so that they can keep them in check. And the barn owl has a series of hisses and screeches. Not as interesting as some of the other ones. It's pretty creepy sounding to me. Okay, let's go. Let's see if I can. Oh, did it again? Oh, one more. Okay, and that's what the barn owl looks in flight. Oh, look how big the head is, and that squared off head compared to the rest of the body. It's almost like it's like this giant head coming at you. Next, we have the long-eared owls, and these are birds of woodlands, conifer groves with dense forest habitat, and that's what they use for the roosting during the day, but they are hunting in the fields, so they need this mix of habitat, this deep, dark woods, as well as the open fields. They're about 14 inches in size, wingspan of about 35 inches. They're migratory and nomadic. I always think of them as the mini great horned owl. And everything's just like a pulled, like almost as if you took a smaller great horned owl and then stretched it out, because everything's a little bit thinner. The ear tufts are black with orange buff fringes. Very secretive and nocturnal, and they are wonderfully camouflaged. And sometimes they'll actually get up on the side of the trunk of the tree, and they become almost invisible. I got to be honest with you and say that I've searched for them and have not had much success finding a roost. Eats mostly mammals and typically uses stick nest or abandoned nest from other birds. Outside of the breeding season, they may roost up into groups up to 100. And this past season, just before the Christmas bird count for our territory, we had 7 in one tree. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Here we go. We can listen to their song. Another series. Sounds like a baby crying or something. But then they also have a hoot. At the end, you'll hear the hoot. You hear that? Mm-hmm. It's a single hoot as compared to hoo 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 of the great horned owl. Oh, that's me again. Okay, and this is what the long-eared looks like in flight. Next, we're going to talk about the short-eared owl. Difference: the short-eared and the long-ear have similar characteristics, except the short-ear has little tiny tufts, tiny tufts, not those big long tufts of the long-ear. This is a bird that it lives around, much like the barn owl, open fields, grasslands, and tundra. It is an irregular and eruptive breeding bird when the rodent populations are high in the field. They have this rounded head with tiny ear tufts. And it's kind of interesting because short-eared owls, if you ever go out into the fields, you'll be noticing towards sunset, the last of the harriers or marsh hawks are dancing around the fields, and after the sun goes down, they'll hunt a little bit longer. Usually when the marsh hawks or the northern harriers go in for the night, that is when the short ears come out. So there's still be a twilight zone where these fellows are out there hunting the fields. And they're really neat because you'll see them. They remind me of these white giant flying foxes or flying bats. And they're dancing out above the field. And of course, they're looking for their mammal prey, small mammals, and especially mice. And these do nest on the ground. Could be fields, it could be marshlands, things like that. And they have a bark-like call. Okay, that's the short ear. Okay, let's see if we can go to the next one. Okay, and that's the short ear in flight. Awful lot of white when they're in flight. Next, we're going to talk about the cute little bugger. This is the one that was found in the Christmas tree in New York City. I call it the little, what do they call it? Eddie Munster, because it has this little V pattern. I don't know if anybody, Eddie Munster from the Munsters, he had that V pattern. These are birds of the boreal forests in the mountains. Very small. We're talking about 8 inches. Remember, a robin is about 9 inches, and they are migratory. The little white between the eyes, they are nocturnal and very secretive. And they eat mostly mice. They hunt at dusk and dawn. They drop down onto their prey in the low branches. And this was a surprise to me. Most frequently banded owl, and they're very tame and trusting. The only one I have ever found myself unfortunately passed away from starvation. It was a first-year bird, and it passed away. It died literally within the rehabber's hand. Very sad, but cute little bugs. They really are cute little bugs, and they nest inside of cavities in trees. Like, for example, an old woodpecker's nest is perfect, and they have this high toot 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 call. And I'll play that. This is the one I said. It sounds like a truck backing up. Maybe I should say more like an alien spaceship or something. I don't know. So that is the, I did it again. Okay, that is the northern saw-whet owl. That's the bugger in flight. I'm sure that that was a picture taken from a banded bird. I have to look to see if there's a band on there. And then we have our last owl. This is our snowy owl. This is one of our eruptive owl species. And what that means is there's certain years when they will come down in fairly large numbers. And as a matter of fact, this is actually a pretty good year. And typically it's either there's an overabundance of prey items up there in the tundra. The lemmings are produce in mass, and they're able to produce more young. And what happens is the adults basically aren't going to let the youngsters hang out, so they have to disperse and go someplace else. It is the largest owl by weight in North America. The great gray owl is taller in terms of size, but by weight, the snowy owl is the largest. These are one of the owls that may actually hunt in the daytime. So you may see them in the daytime. And especially if they're feeding youngsters, they're actually feeding them 24 hours a day up there in the high Arctic, because the sun never goes down. They're generally white, and there can be some black markings on the males. Tend to be paler than the females. So if we're looking at this is probably a male on the top, and this is probably a female or a juvenile on the bottom. And as I said, there are eruptive, meaning they come down certain years, and other years they don't. And you'll see those, especially in open spaces. They're notorious for airports. They love to stop in at airports. And again, when they have a big boom cycle of lemmings, they'll produce extra youngsters. They breed on the ground, and their diet ranges from rabbits, rodents, hares, squirrels, geese, seabirds, sea ducks. One of the things that's been really fascinating is they've started putting GPSs on these eruptive birds to find out where they go. And they had one, I can't remember if it was banded and put a GPS on in Maryland or Delaware. And what they found is they will actually fly out into the middle of the Delaware Bay, perch on buoys out there, and then hunt sea ducks, which is pretty amazing to me that they would do that. And some of the birds, they're nesting up in this high Arctic region up here at the top, and some of them will actually fly out into the open ocean and land on ice and actually hunt sea ducks out there in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. So they're pretty successful when it comes to that, that strategy. They can handle a wide range of prey, and they can actually hunt in a wide range of conditions, as long as it's open space, no woods for the species. And then this is the call. Okay, and then here is a nest of snowy owl. It looks like there's at least two babies there, nesting on the ground. This is not dirt. This is actually piles of lemmings. This is a cache of food that will be fed to these little buggers. And if you have a massive production, you catch as many as you can. And remember, you're in the high Arctic, and hopefully, well, at least for now, you can still have a slight refrigeration temperature. It's not like it's going to go bad, and you can feed them to the youngsters. You can notice, look at the size difference between these two. Look at the size difference between these two. Okay. That's what a snowy owl looks like in flight. Pretty impressive.
Wow.
And you can actually go to Cornell, and there's some in Jersey right now. There's some in Pennsylvania right now. You can actually get notified as to where they're at. These are some of the sources that we used for the presentation. And I did forget to mention, this is the first time we're actually doing this presentation. So if anybody, feedback is welcomed. I really would appreciate any feedback of things that work or things that don't work. So with that, next thing is questions.
Your space bar showing us.
I'm going to stop your screen share so we can see people.
Okay.
So if you have a question, just raise your hand. Diane, unmute yourself. Yeah.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I have a story instead of a question.
Ooh, that's great. I love stories.
Okay. About 2 weeks ago, it was about 10:30 at night, and I'm in the house and I hear two great horned owls communicating with each other. So I rush outside into my backyard, and I'm standing on my porch with my binoculars, even though I'm trying to see if I can get them or not. So I start imitating them,
Mm-hmm.
and they stopped. And then they started calling again. So I imitated them again. And then both of them started flying at me from across the way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. So then they landed in the trees right next to my porch. And the two of them were going at it with whoo, 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 whoo. And I didn't call again because I didn't want to upset them any more than I had already done. So I just stayed very quiet, and they continued like that for like 10 minutes. Then all of a sudden they quieted down, and I watched them fly out of the trees and out. It was just the most amazing experience.
Wow.
It was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you called back, what you are signaling is that you're competing.
Right.
These are a pair bond that are together, and you're an interloper in their territory. So they're not real happy.
No, January is when they're mating, right?
Yep.
Okay, so they're also looking for nesting areas and things like that too, or do they already have that space?
Yeah, it's usually January is the time period where they basically call the start of the breeding season, but it takes place prior to that.
Okay.
So they can be calling back and forth as a pair prior to that time period.
Uh-huh.
They may have, prior to January, they may have a nesting site chosen. But typically they usually give January 1st as the time period for the nesting season to start for great horned owls.
Right. And they have awakened me like at 3 o'clock in the morning with their hooting outside our bedroom window. So that's been really cool too. Yeah. But that was just the most amazing experience to have them flying at me. I was like, woo.
Yep.
Diane, the security force will be at your door tomorrow with a citation for breaking up courting great horned owls.
Any other questions?
Now, what they nest, I've seen great horned owls nesting in red tail hawk nests,
right,
at Longwood Gardens.
Yeah.
And so that was really neat. So I did see like two babies. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And it would be really neat to see if we could find where the nesting pair is here in Hershey's Mill.
Yeah.
But keep a lookout.
Yeah, they'll take a crow's nest, they'll take a great horn nest, they'll take, in my case, it was the story I told, it was the great blue heron nest. They'll nest in the cavities of a tree. The picture I showed you, the two owlets, that's at the John James Audubon Center at Mill Grove. There's a hole inside of an old sycamore tree, and their youngsters are wedged in there, and that's where they nested.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't build their own nest. And they will take they'll take an old squirrel nest in certain instances if
Oh,
it
if
works.
it's big enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Very neat.
Yeah.
Jado, have you identified nests in your area? You'll have to unmute yourself. For Jado? Have you identified nests, great horned owls nesting in your area?
No, I haven't seen a nest. I've only heard great horned and screech owls.
Okay.
And there's one that lives in that one well, comes visits that box up in the nature area.
Mm-hmm.
That's a screech.
Mhm.
Not this year yet. I keep watching.
I was a member of the Chester County Camera Club, and we had a woman, I think, from National Geographic that came, but she said there's many places in Valley Forge National Park where there's a whole host of owls. Do you know where that is? But she wouldn't say where it was. Yeah.
I can let you know, and especially, you know, the habitat for great horns and screech owls is pretty much going to be the wooded zones, and there's numerous great horns and screech owls within Valley Forge Park. However, the one owl that's really cool for Valley Forge Park is the short-eared owls. And short-eared owls are flying out over the meadow, and the area that I used to look for them at dusk is going to be across from the chapel.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And a trick you can use if you know birds, and if the habitat is good for a harrier, if the habitat is good for, I'm trying to think, a meadowlark, it's going to be good for a short-eared owl. So it's basically large spans of field, hay fields. That's going to be the habitat.
Around dusk.
Yep. You go out around dusk and just be patient. Just scan the fields, and all of a sudden you'll see these bat-like creatures that kind of start swooping across the field. And you kind of look for them and hope that they kind of pass right by you, because they will come fairly close in certain instances. Some years is better than others for short-eared owls. And I just heard about a couple places in Jersey where there's a large number of short ears floating around. But Valley Forge is probably the best area that I can think of off the top of my head in this area to see short ears.
Thank you.
Yeah, in one of the earlier set of pictures where you were looking at the talons,
Mm-hmm.
it looked as though one of them, I think it was the saw-whet, the fourth talon was much, much smaller than the others. And I didn't know whether that was just that picture or if it's generally true, if it's related to any difference in how they perch or.
That's a really good question. I think I'm going to have to look that one up, because I've never really noticed that before, but I could see that might be the case, especially the back talon.
Yeah, I mean, it was the back one.
Yeah. The back talon, I could see that being, maybe a little bit larger. I'm going to have to look that up. Thank you for that question. I'm stumped. I'm like, yeah. I could see that. I'll have to take a look and do some research on that question, because I'll have to take a look at the picture too to see if that is the case.
Well, actually, I also have another question.
Sure.
Several years ago, there were some barred owls that were nesting in the woods at Stroud Preserve.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed as though, I mean, like several times when I was out there hiking in the afternoon, they were active and flying around. I didn't know if that was a general thing that they do tend to be active, not just at nightfall or.
Yeah, I should have mentioned a little bit of a caveat with a lot of these owls, and that is depending on the time of year, um, when the youngsters need an awful lot of food, they're going to stretch their time of hunt. And also when those youngsters fledge, and especially if you're talking about in the case of a barred owl, you're probably looking at somewhere around like late June, July, in which they fledge. Those youngsters they don't really know what they're doing. They're kind of like bad teenagers. They're not necessarily abiding by all the rules. As a matter of fact, the gentleman who did our presentation on barred owls from Charlotte, North Carolina, he was dealing with barred owls that were really doing bad teenager behavior. They were actually hitting bikers.
Oh, gee.
They were actually stupid
Wow.
people riding a bike in the middle of the daytime. And I think you will see these strange things happening, especially after those youngsters fledge. I'm curious, was it in like the middle of summertime when?
I'm trying to think. I think it would have been like late spring, early summer.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a very good chance that it may have been a youngster who's out and about, or it could have been that it's basically the parents are looking to maximize their food sources, and it's like, hey, if it's available, why not take advantage of it?
Yeah.
Where was the blue heron rookery you were talking about? Was that the one on the Chester Valley Trail in Berwyn?
No, that's actually, I'm kind of bummed about that rookery. I'm glad about that rookery, but bummed at the same token because that rookery was in my territory, right near my neighborhood. And what happened was one year the bald eagles decided, you know something, if I take 2 of these heron nests and put it together, I have a giant nest. And sure enough, the bald eagles stole my heron rookery and they had no place else to go. So I think they actually crossed the hill and went to that. That's a great heron rookery right now. I'm really glad it's still within our territory, but it's outside of my personal area.
Yeah,
Yeah, I am familiar. Now the site where I had the heron rookery, it's actually in New Hanover Township along the Swamp Creek. That's in Montgomery County. Like it's in western Montgomery County.
Yeah, so we went to that rookery in Berwyn, I think this spring, right before the leaves came out, and you could just stand there right on the Chester Valley Trail, right off the Cassat Road,
Yeah.
and look up at the trees. And I don't know, there must have been 10 or 15 of them there. It was incredible.
Yeah. And what's amazing to me is those rookeries, the storms come, and I don't know how they look like they're thrown together, but those nests don't really come down that frequently. It's pretty amazing that they somehow take all those sticks and they put them up there so they don't fall down. So there'll be like 40-mile, 50-mile-an-hour winds, and those nests just kind of dance back and forth.
They're junior engineers, I guess.
Yeah.
Barb, you had a question.
Oh, I did. I am brand new to birding since moving here to Hershey's Mill. So I'm curious as to, you had the list of resources. Is there a favorite book that is excellent for a beginner birder with identifying the owls? And you talked about harriers. I don't even know what a harrier is. So I have to, I got to back up a couple of steps.
Yeah.
What do you recommend?
Let's see. There is Clay and Pat Sutton wrote a book. They were from Cape May, New Jersey, and they wrote a book about how to spot an owl. And they also list some different species. And shoot, I closed out on my presentation, but there was a couple listed sources in that. And if you want, you can send me an email and I'll send you some resources specifically for owls. If you want general birds, There's always this Sibley
Sibley.
Guides is one of the
Okay.
best out there. And he has he has also written some books about bird behavior,
Behavior.
really, really good. And we just did an interview with an author, John Kreitcher. He wrote a really, really good book. It's a part of the Peterson Guides about bird behavior. That's really good. If you're more interested in the birds as compared to the identification, but in terms of identification, the Sibley Guide is a very good resource.
Okay, and how does that, is that connected to the Merlin app for bird identification? Does
Mm.
anybody have that? Have you used that?
I do have that. I do have that. That's from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And that's
Okay.
a really good source too, because nowadays everybody's going with your phones. And if you,
Yeah.
if you don't have the identification on your phone, and the kids, especially, that's what they're doing. Unfortunately for me, I'm kind of a dinosaur. I love, it's my hobby. I collect identification books. So I love picking through those books. But in today's world, those digital resources are out there. Cornell's, Merlin is
Thank
a
you. This is
wonderful.
wonderful.
One of
Most,
the things I like about the Merlin is it just gives you the birds that you're likely to find for a particular location. So it's not like you have a book and you're going through a lot of stuff that you don't have a prayer of seeing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we do have the Sibley Guide, I believe, in the library.
I saw it.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, for everybody, remember that Richardson Nature Group has put a lot of reference books in in the library at Hershey's Mill. They're kept for reference. They can't be taken out, but they can be used in the library. And it covers a whole variety of topics, from birds to plants to mammals, reptiles, amphibians, etc. So if you don't have one and you want to just get a feel for what they're like, please use those sources in the library.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It's time for the quiz then.
Quiz.
Yeah, there's a quiz.
Before we get to the quiz, Vince, you wanted to talk a little bit about the barn owl box business.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a project we're hoping to assist the Pennsylvania Game Commission with, and that has to do with two species which are in significant decline in our area. And the two species are the barn owl and the American kestrel. And both of them are in significant decline because of changes in habitat and changes in land use. And pesticides probably are also part of the problem also. And especially pesticides are a problem with the American kestrel, because they eat an awful lot of insects. They eat mice, they eat birds, but they also eat an awful lot of insects. These are both species of open space. And one of the projects that we're looking to do is we're looking to help the Pennsylvania Game Commission with placement of both barn owl boxes and American kestrel boxes. We're hoping to bring those numbers back up in the habitats where they can live. And one of the requests is basically to build some nesting boxes for them. And these would be specific designs or plans for each of these species. And if somebody from your organization wants to volunteer to build a box or anything like that, we would definitely be able to then, help out with the Game Commission on this particular project.
Yeah, I will be talking with our woodworking shop and see if there are folks there that have a particular interest in doing this. Again, the question has come up about the cost of materials to make them. Once we get a feel for that, our budget might be able to help to pay for some of that if we can find a person or persons that are interested in making them, and then we would be able to provide them to the individual with the Game Commission, who is sort of focusing now on Chester County. They've got boxes in St. Lancashire, Bucks, and Berks County, Montgomery County. They want to move into Chester County and sort of use that as expand their focus on these two particular species of birds. We're looking into see what we can do in Hershey's Mill to assist that project.
That would be wonderful. Okay. Thanks for considering.
I'd like to volunteer my Hershey Mill community garden plot as a location for one of those boxes.
Would that be to replace some of the house sparrow boxes?
Sparrows.
Maybe then the owls will eat the little house sparrows
Yeah.
and get rid of them.
At my my CSA farm, what I put an American kestrel box up, and well, they started nesting there. And one day I was observing the female, and all of a sudden she flies across the field. She reaches into a bluebird house that actually has house sparrows in there,
Yeah.
pulls out a baby house sparrow and proceeds to fly off with a fledgling. That wasn't a fledgling, it was a nestling house sparrow. So
Wow.
American kestrels do eat sparrows as well as meadow voles.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's great.
I hope they don't eat bluebird babies.
They will eat, they will eat bluebirds too. And that's kind of where the shape and structure of your bluebird boxes are very, very important, especially if you are having problems with your bluebirds getting picked off. And in my case, I actually have to put an extra barrier on my entrances, because between cats and other critters, I think my bluebirds are getting picked off every year pretty hard.
I just want to put a note in there. I've seen two sightings of kestrels here in the last 2 weeks.
Oh, Jado, that's great.
Here, yeah, right over that little marshy area right in front of the clubhouse. I've seen them in there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you guys have about 100 acres of grassland or field? Or?
Yeah, we do.
We have an entire golf course at your disposal.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm sure there would be locations within Hershey's Mill that would be appropriate or serious consideration for sites for putting up kestrel boxes. I'm not sure we really have the room or the appropriate location for barn owl boxes. So I think our focus would be more on trying to encourage more kestrel.
Right.
Yeah, the kestrels, you need about 100+ acres of open space, no thicket, and they can handle a little bit of agriculture, but the rough area is really important because they do need some food. If you have a little bit of an area that's a little bit tall, meadow, hayfield, grass, that's definitely a little helpful.
Now, I thought I'd be in contact with the wildlife biologist at the Game Commissioner, sort of overseeing all this, invite him to come to Hershey's Mill and just look around and see if there are appropriate sites that might be considered. That would be a more emphasis to make boxes that they could be put up in the proper location.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Serpentine area might be a good spot for the kestrel.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's meadow and there's woods and there's open space.
Good area.
Mm-hmm.
A problem we have related to kestrels is that we also have a lot of pesticides and herbicides linked to the golf course.
Golf course, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
But that would not be true in the Serpentine Barrens.
That's true.
that could
That's
work.
right. Yeah.
necessarily. We're looking into that. We just had a meeting with the Hersheyville Landscape folks this morning for several hours, and we'll be talking with the superintendent of grounds for the golf course as well, looking at the what is being sprayed, when it's being sprayed, why it's being sprayed, so that we try to get a better handle on that sort of thing.
Oh, that's great.
Wilbur. That's wonderful.
What about the fact that they enjoy bluebirds as part of their diet?
Yeah, and as long as the structures of the box is okay, and then they can get to that fledged state, Kestrels are part of the natural environment, and
Right.
bluebirds are doing very well. And I have to be honest and say the only reason that bluebirds are doing very well is because we have wonderfully committed human beings who build these bluebird boxes. I did not see my first bluebird until I was probably 25 years of age. And of course, the reason that bluebirds suffered for so long, it was because of pesticides and things like that. But in addition, it had to do with the starlings, and that the starlings would take any of the extra boxes from which, and in natural settings, bluebirds would have used woodpecker nests, old abandoned woodpecker nests, or old abandoned woodpecker roosts. And once people started putting boxes up, that is when bluebirds started to succeed. And it's so successful at this point, and they're so committed to us, that I got to be honest and say, I don't think I have ever seen a bluebird nest in a natural cavity. Any bluebird I have seen has nested in a box that a human being has built. I'm not saying it doesn't happen out there. I'm sure it does, but my experience locally is it's because of human beings that we have nice numbers of bluebirds.
I think,
Well, at least we've done something right.
Yep. No, that's.
I think most folks know that we have in Hershey's Mill over 100 nest boxes sited throughout the village. And we've had a very good year this year with bluebird. And I think our biggest predator on bluebirds are house sparrows.
Yep.
That's our big problem to face. The wrens sometimes are disruptive, but not nearly as disruptive as house sparrows are. And we are adapting many of the boxes which we know are getting hit with predators with guards on the front of various types, seeing which ones seem to work the best in which location. We're trying to tackle that problem.
Yeah, you guys are doing a great job. You guys are really doing a good job.
Any other questions for Vince tonight? It's coming down on, we've been on about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I have one question. How do you spell John Kreitcher's last name?
It's Cricher.
Okay. Thank you.
And just a reminder that Vince will be back in March.
Thank you.
Do the Hawk ID for beginners.
Oh, that's great.
Next month, doing a program on purple martins. In April, we'll be doing a program on bluebird. Steve Rust will be here, president of the Pennsylvania Bluebird Society, in that talk. That's April. May, we're hoping to put in place a talk on and pollinators and beehives and maintaining beehives and whatnot. That'll be a new one for us. So
I just wanted to mention, and somebody thankfully informed me that I misspelled John's name. It's Kricher.
Okay, great. Thank you.
My bad. Thank you. I appreciate the heads up.
Great.
It's a great book.
Thank you so much for your time.
Super.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
so much. Great.
I'll see everybody in what did we say? Hawks is March, right?
March.
I think it's the exact date, but it's on our website.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Christine, I emailed you about, I haven't seen the pictures yet.
Yeah, I know, because I haven't gotten it back and I made another one, but I've been hearing really bad stories about even day delivery from the Postal Service. So
Okay.
I've been thinking about just driving over and dropping it off. Is that
Meet him halfway.
Either that, we can meet halfway, or maybe I would be down in the area, so I'll let you know. in the
Okay,
next couple of days.
let's think about that and be in touch because, yeah, and the other alternative, which I'm not adept at, is to put it up on the cloud or something. I don't know. Have you ever worked with
Oh,
that?
sending it to UPS or FedEx be better?
Excuse me?
Sending it by UPS or FedEx be a
Yeah, that's another option to check out. I think maybe I'll do the UPS because the Postal Service said they returned it to me, which it hasn't gotten back to me yet, but I do have another thumb drive for you, so.
I don't think I'd wait for the US Postal Service anymore. They've wrecked that service.
Yeah, they actually lost our Guide and Digest for the month we determined. But I'll check with, I'll go over to UPS tomorrow and either send it that way or else I'll be in touch to work something else.
Okay, if not, we'll work something out. No problem.
Okay, good, thanks.
Also, before we all disappear, Michael and Eileen, I just wanted to say how nice it is to see you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Ann.
Yeah, hi, Ann. You let your hair grow.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, everybody looks good. Nice to meet everybody. Yeah. You're like, hi, and Wilbur over there. Yeah. And Jado, Diane. Christine. Can always count on Diane for a good story. That was something else.
I'm
Oh
gonna
my
keep them
God.
coming.
Now, Eileen, did you tell Sue about the lecture, Sue Harden? Or was okay.
Yeah.
You were the person.
Yeah.
Where did Sue go?
I don't know. She got off.
She left.
When it's over, it's over. Done.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, great to see you.
Good
Okay.
night. Have a great night.
Everybody,
Bye.
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 See ya.